Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Past the Wire TV. We have a very interesting guest on this episode, somebody that many of you might not expected to see on a horse racing show, but maybe we'll all get a little bit educated about what the Humane Society is all about. They are not PETA. We have Valerie Pringle from the Humane Society, and we're very, very fortunate and thankful to have you, Valerie. But we'll learn a little bit about the Humane Society, what their position is on horse racing, what their take on the current state of horse racing is, where they'd like to see it go in the future, if they'd like to see it survive at all, because many of us in racing are of the opinion that a lot of the animal rescue organizations are against racing altogether. So, Valerie, first off, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on behalf of the Humane Society. And first and foremost, what is your role at the Humane Society?
I am campaign manager for Equine Protection, and I work primarily on federal legislation to protect horses. So we're talking primarily worked on the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act to get that passed. We also work on anti-horse slaughter federal legislation.
Okay.
And we also work on federal legislation to end the soaring of Tennessee walkers and other related breeds. So those are the three. There's two of us in the Equine Protection department. We're both horse people. I've owned and trained horses my whole life. Rode a wonderful off-the-track thoroughbred for many, many years. So I think at the bottom of this, we are horse people more than anything
Okay.
else.
Interesting. So is it safe to say, or would it be an accurate statement to say that the Humane Society as an organization is not anti-horse racing and is not for the abolishment or elimination of horse racing in the United States altogether?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. We
Okay.
are we have a history of working with some stakeholders to make it as safe as possible. We were the lead animal welfare organization that has worked for the past several years on the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act. So we work with people from NYRA, CEO of the Jockey Club, Jim Gagliano, NTRA, a lot of different people. And we walk the halls of Congress, both the Senate side and the House side, and had a lot of people come down from the industry to work with us because we both want racing to be as safe as it can for horses and, of course, for humans. So we are not opposed, but, as you can understand, we don't like doping. We don't like excessive deaths. We are pro seeing some whip modifications, things like that. So we are don't want to shut it down. We want it to be as safe as it can be.
Right. And I would venture to say, and me personally, I love horse racing and I would like to see it as safe as it can possibly be. There are inherent dangers to the sport, and that's just a troubling reality. When you race horses, there are going to be, unfortunately, incidents, but I'm all for minimizing them and protecting the horses and doing everything that we can to make it as safe a game as possible. And I'm glad to hear that that's your organization's position as well. And I don't think a lot of people in racing know that. People on high level, like the people that you're working with, may know that. But I think that a lot of the everyday casual race fans don't really know that and kind of lump you and PETA together.
Right.
And PETA's kind of established itself as an enemy of the industry and wants to just, they're I believe, for the abolishment of horse racing altogether. And that gets horse racing people's claws up and defenses up because it's their livelihoods. And more importantly, what people don't realize, and you probably do because you're a horse person, it's our passion. You know, it's a way of life when you're involved in this game at any level. You know,
Right.
it really is. No matter what job in racing you have, and that's probably true for a lot of different jobs, but whatever job in racing you have, racing really becomes a way of your life.
Right. And
You know,
I would add that, we've worked with other industries that involve animals. Um,
right.
let's say, like farmers. We're not trying to end the use of meat, but what we're trying to do is improve the conditions for those animals. Same thing with poultry. We work with a lot of high stakes, big ag types of groups in an effort to kind of come together and do what's best for the animals. And I know that there are groups that want to see racing completely eliminated, but that doesn't help horses now. And that doesn't isn't a realistic view of what should be happening. And I like to think that we are realists in working with Congress and working with advocates to try to get what we can done to help animals, whether it's in farming, uh, trophy hunting, wildlife, horse racing, etc.
I agree with that. And I'm actually glad to hear it. I supported HISA and the Horse Racing Safety and Integrity Act. Uh, I've got questions and concerns about it because I don't really understand it fully. I don't think anybody really does. You probably have a much better understanding of it than I and most people do. But I'm curious and cautiously optimistic as to how it's going to work. I did read the statement from the head of it the other day in response to, the latest news in horse racing of what's going on with the, Medina Spirit positive. And I was encouraged by what he said and by his take on it and by the uniformity that they are going to try and bring to the table. Because one of the big problems, and it doesn't just, in my opinion, start and end at the drug issue. It's across the board in racing. There's never really any true leadership.
There's
The
no
racetrack,
commissioner. Yeah,
right? No commissioner. There's no central governing body. There's no
38
uniformity.
states,
Everybody operates on their
38
own.
sets of rules. Exactly.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
fractured.
Right, exactly. And it's just a system that doesn't work today, and for years I heard the same argument. Well, we run in all these different states. You can never have that. I'm like, well, they play baseball in different states. They can
Exactly.
play. We have a commissioner. All sports have that same logistical problem, and they manage to get it done. So I think that HISA is something that racing has no right to reject because they brought it upon themselves. They failed to police and govern themselves properly, and that caused the need for someone else to come in and do it. And whether HISA is the perfect candidate or not remains to be seen. But I think they're here. The law passed, and I think we need to support it and see where it goes and get the most out of it. Um, can you tell us a little bit about what the short-term, low-hanging fruit goals of HISA are going to be and the long-term goals of what HISA is going to be?
I believe that the one of the highlights is that they're going to bring some uniformity to the sport. Like you said, three strikes you're out in DC, but you can't have two strikes you're out in St. Louis. So we're going to have some uniformity when it comes to which drugs, what amounts. They're going to work with labs to bring them up to certain standards. So I think that all of that is good. I believe that they're going to really take a good hard look at which drugs should be given or can be given, what the withdrawal times should be. And so the other thing that I think that they're going to work on that I think is meaningful is they're going to put some teeth into this for trainers or whomever who illegally dope horses. They're not going to be able to be banned in one state and then go race in another. So there's going to be some reciprocity. Um, we have a Humane Society um, uh, racing council, and it includes many people from the racing industry. Chris McCarran, uh, former Hall of Fame jockey, is on it. Joe DeFrancis, Jim Gagliano, Hal Handel, Barry Grant, who's a vet. So we have a lot of industry people, and we've worked together to try to work on this bill and really take a good look at what's working in racing and what isn't. And I think universally, everyone on the council feels that there aren't effective deterrents. If you can just pay a fine, and then go race someplace else or race in the same state, it's not really enough of a deterrent. And I think that's why sometimes trainers might use a prohibited drug or, a drug in excess of what they're allowed to use because they think, well, it's the price of business. And if I'm caught, I'll pay the fine and move on. So I think that whole mentality is wrong. And I'm hoping that the authority, which is what HISA created, is really going to take a look at cleaning up the sport and getting rid of people who think that the status quo is fine. And, they're going to have two standing committees under the authority, one on doping and one on racetrack safety. So I think both of that is good. They have a nice mix of people from the industry as well as people who are not from the industry so that they can try to come together. The industry people will help educate the non-industry people, and they're going to work together, I believe, to make racing safe, uniform, and again, get rid of people who, aren't as concerned about the horses. They're more concerned about winning.
And that's a big problem and something that I also embrace. Where I differ from a lot of people, and I don't think it's in principle, because I think in principle I'm on the same page. But one of the things I don't like is selective enforcement or backtracking on a situation. And I'll give you an example. I differentiate cheating from an overage in a legal therapeutic medication. And I want to talk a little more about legal therapeutic medications and race day medications in a minute, but I just want to clarify something for you for this conversation. Excuse me. I look at something where a trainer gets an overage of something he's allowed to use, okay? And they test for these minuscule amounts, picograms, which I don't even know how little that is. I look at that as, okay, something that should be controlled, should be policed, and probably should fall under my belief that we should have as little or as close to no race day medication as possible, and kind of make that whole problem go away.
Like all the other nations.
Yeah, right.
We're one of the few that allows race day medication in this.
Right, and I'm of the opinion, which I'm in the minority in this opinion, but I'm of the opinion that if your horse needs medication to run, he should probably be getting stall rest or farm rest or time off until he can run without it. And a lot of people in the game tell me that's not realistic, and that's just not how it is. And same way you need a Tylenol after you work out, a horse may need this, a horse may need that, and I have a hard time with that. Okay, but I differentiate that type of infraction. Okay, because technically these are the rules; these are legal drugs. I differentiate that from, say, the Jason Service and Jorge Navarro indictments, where they were using some ridiculous product that nobody even knows exactly what it is, which to my surprise, I wrote an article about a couple of months ago, and it's SG-1000, whatever the heck you call it. It's still available to buy online. When I researched it, I'm like, they're still selling this, whatever it is, all over the place. So theoretically, I could have bought some, snuck it into the backside, and given it to a horse, and nobody would know. I differentiate that from, um, we're obviously going to have to touch base on it, from the Medina Spirit positive in the Kentucky Derby, which doesn't mean that I think it's right that the horse tested positive for betamethasone. That's where people kind of get me wrong. I don't think that's right, and I think that there should be a penalty for that. But I don't think that goes to the same level as somebody who gets caught with a syringe or using something that's just a complete unknown or illicit performance enhancing drug, as opposed to a legal therapeutic medication.
Right. And I believe that the people on the authority, who include, people with racing experience, racetrack veterinarians, et cetera, are seriously going to look at that. There's already some differentiation with class A drugs, class B, class C. So I think that I'm hoping that they are realistic, and that a small overage of a legal drug is treated differently from someone who injects cobra venom in a horse.
Exactly.
And I mean, that is just common sense.
Right. Right. And but you don't see it, and I just get concerned about the mob mentality that we see as a result of the Medina Spirit positive. Um, we all know that Bob Baffert has had other positives for legal therapeutic medications, and that's whatever that is on his part. Sloppy. There should be a penalty. It should be addressed, but I don't think it's right to say, you know what, we go back and we say, you're out of racing, you're going to get a harsher penalty than anybody else, even though there's people with more violations than him that are still running. But
Right.
didn't happen in the Kentucky Derby,
Right.
So that's selective enforcement, and that I think is where I'm hoping to see HISA come in, or somebody come in and say, listen, these are the rules, this is what's allowed, this is what's not allowed, and if you break the rules, it's a privilege to play in this game, and we don't have to keep you here if you break the rules. I don't know that we can backtrack now and kind of massage that, and I think we need to set the standard going forward and let everybody know what the rules are, enforce them fairly and equally, and in my opinion, as harsh as it may be, with a zero tolerance policy. There are jurisdictions where if you use an illicit substance, you're out. One time, you're out.
I mean, I agree with you, and that's the problem. Is you have jurisdictions that don't have the same uh, lab standards, or don't have the same regulations. And I think that a lot of people will embrace the fact that there's one set of rules. Those rules are deemed fair. That trainers don't have to go to another state and say, so let me see how much of this drug can I give in this state, because in a few days we're going to move to another state. And it's confusing for trainers. I don't think it's good for horses to have one level in one state and one level in another. So I think that is the beauty of HISA. One set of rules, again, focusing on treatment of the horse. One of the big differences between horse doping and people is someone like Lance Armstrong chose to do it, and these horses don't. And whether it's a performance enhancing drug or a pain masking drug, I think that either one they're going to be looked at with one set of standards, and people will know what they are, and people who choose to cheat will know, you're caught with this, you can't just go to California or Arkansas or Florida now. You're out. And I don't know what kind of regulations they're going to do, if it's going to be a 3 strikes you're out, if it's this class, whatever. But I'm hoping that the integrity of the people that are making these decisions, again, people who deeply care about horse racing, are going to try to do what's best for the sport, which is also what's best for horses and the jockeys who ride them.
I agree, and I'm I'm really happy to learn that the Humane Society is on board, and has taken this position and is as active as you're indicating that you are, with HISA and with these rules and with animal welfare and the safety of the horses, because I think it's sadly long overdue. Um,
It is, but there I think, this was not something that this law or the bill was not something that we created. It was the Jockey Club pushing, seeing
right,
the need for reform, coming to us and some other animal welfare groups and saying, stand with us, help us.
right.
And we met, we kind of looked at what they wanted, how we felt about it, and ultimately the decision was to stand with them and try to make this sport as safe as it can be for horses.
Right. And you brought out something that I say all the time is that, when it comes to athletes who decide to use steroids, or, you mentioned, Lance Armstrong, and there've been many other, the baseball steroid scandal and whatnot, that's a choice that they make.
Sure.
Horses don't have a voice to make a choice. We're the custodians of them, and we're the ones that have to, speak for them. So that's, a really good point.
I think
One,
I think that one thing that a lot of people who aren't horse people don't seem to understand is that, you know, a, a horse is a racehorse for just a short amount of their lives,
right,
and that they live, usually close to 30 years if they're well cared for. And one thing I'm hopeful about, because of HISA, is that horses will be able to transition to secondary careers and they'll be healthier. It's not like they're going to have, some lameness issue that has been medicated. And then when they come off the track, no one can use them for eventing or dressage or trail riding. They just become a pasture pet. And those kinds of horses are hard to place. And those kinds of horses are also at risk for slaughter
right.
because they're broken when they leave the industry. So one of my hopes is that these horses, when they're finished their racing careers, are going to be healthy and ready to transition into another sport. And as we all know, thoroughbreds are so incredibly athletic and so incredibly versatile. Um, personally, my favorite breed. And I want to give them every opportunity to become, you know, whatever they can be. Boyd Martin in the last Olympics used an off the track thoroughbred that wasn't a good racehorse, but
Right.
was a wonderful eventing horse. So
Fantastic.
that's one of the things we'll cut down on the number of horses that can't have jobs and are sent to slaughter because they're going to be healthier and they're going to be adopted out a lot faster.
That's all great news. I want to ask you about something else that I found interesting, and I don't know how involved HISA is going to be or what your take on this is, but because of my personal involvement and exposure, in rescue that I do personally, I've had the opportunity to deal with a lot of what I'll call off-track veterinarians, and of course, I've been in racing my entire life. I've dealt with plenty of on-track veterinarians.
Mhm.
And the difference in philosophy from on and off-track veterinarians is remarkable, in my
Hmm.
opinion. Okay. Um, I mean, I almost want to write an article about it or do a show about it or something, because they're just different in philosophy from one to another is something that I've had a hard time figuring out, and I can't determine whether it's because racetrack vets are just more exposed to the racetrack and backstretch life and stress that is put on the racehorse, that they have a different way of looking at
Mhm.
treatment, medicating, and things of that nature, or we're just so far gone in running the sport a certain way that we've gotten away from what's truly best for the horse. Because off-track vets kind of tell me, listen, horse shouldn't need Lasix. If a horse needs Lasix, something's wrong. If they all, occasionally a couple might, but 95% of them shouldn't, be hemorrhaging every time that they run. Uh, they shouldn't need this, they shouldn't need that, they shouldn't have to have this type of medication or have this done to a joint in order to be able to race. No, 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 no. They need time, they need this, they need that. And a horse in the stall is not making an owner or a trainer any money. Get him to the race is more of the philosophy on the backside. Well, we can give him this and he can run. We can give him that and he can run, and it'll be all right. And there's a big conflict or contrast in the way that they look at how these horses should be treated and cared for. Is that something that HISA is going to have any input in or jurisdiction over in veterinary care, and what's allowed, who the racetrack vets are? Is there gonna be some type of centralized pharmacy and things of that nature? Is that on the agenda, or is that something that they're looking at?
Well, I believe it's all of that has been mentioned. Since I'm not a member of the authority, I don't really know exactly what they're going to do. I know with the focus on uniformity, that's one of the things I've heard about, different ideas for supervising racetrack veterinarians, et cetera. So the fact that there are veterinarians on the authority, I think, is a good sign. And I'm not sure how they're going to do that. And one of the things is these regulations are to go into effect in about a year, July 2022. And prior to that, they're going to be publicized. Um, and the Federal Trade Commission kind of oversees, so there'll be an opportunity for the public to comment on their rough draft of regulations. So I think we're all just going to have to wait and see. I think there are enough people on the authority with experience that know what's broken and what needs to be fixed. Like I said, trainers, jockeys, there's a number of people with insider knowledge, and hopefully they'll be able to come up with the very best system that they can.
Right, and it's encouraging. Some of the detractors, and like I said, I supported the act, and I was not one of them. But some of the detractors were like, "Oh well, where's the funding for all this going to come from? We're never going to be able to afford to do this. It's never going to happen." And sure enough, it did happen. The bill passed. It's law now. Is funding a concern? Do we know how things are going to be funded going forward? I remember reading early on that it was going to be up to the racetracks to kind of opt in to fund it on their own. Um, do you have any insight into how the funding or the money is going to work?
I don't. And again, I think that's something that the authority is going to look at. Um, Now, I believe that in many ways we would be better off with fewer racetracks that had a lot of money to spend on improvements, et cetera, whether it's new surfaces, et cetera, um, than to have some that are underfunded and some that barely squeak by. I think that that would be a step toward making racing safer. But again, we have to kind of wait and see. We have no input. You have no input. We just have to wait and see what these experts do and how they decide to tackle this. And then there will be an opportunity for the public to voice their concerns.
Right, which is also encouraging. And I can't disagree with you there either. I've often said that sometimes less is more.
Mhm.
We may need less racing, but just more quality and control and safer racing than we have now. Because I don't think it's a secret in the industry at all, um, Valerie, that bad things go on in the sport. Okay, and I think it's worse at some of the smaller, lesser known, lesser scrutinized tracks than some of the bigger circuits. And I don't want to single horse racing out, because every sport and every business has bad actors in it. It's just
Exactly.
It's the way of the world, you know what I mean? Racing is easy to pick on because it involves animals and it just inspires a lot of passion on both sides. But we're
Right,
not unique. There's corruption and bad people in every sport and every game that involves money, including the stock market. I mean,
right.
we're not
I
special when it comes to that.
Right, but I think in order to draw in younger participants, a lot of uh, industries that use animals have been rethinking what they do. And animal welfare is a concern for a lot of people. It's been, one of the top two or three in surveys. So I think the fact that racing has figured that out and has made steps to really address animal welfare. If they don't, they're going to go the way of, like dog racing, greyhound racing, where that industry didn't try to make changes. That industry didn't try to come up with laws. Um, and they're going by the wayside. But horse racing, when you look at some of the efforts of, for instance, the Jockey Club with the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, Retired Racehorse Project, you can see that the effort is there. And I think if you combine that effort and you convince people that horses are being treated humanely, that they will continue to draw new people. But this new generation that's growing up deeply cares about animal welfare, and I think that racing kind of saw the writing on the wall.
And that's encouraging because I always say racing misses the boat, and the ship is usually sailed by the time they catch on, and maybe I stand corrected in this particular case. Maybe they are being a little bit more proactive in recognizing
Right.
that than I gave them credit for, and I'm happy to hear that and admit that I may have been wrong when it comes to that. I would like to pick your brain a little bit and touch base on another hot issue that's going on in the game, and that's the whip or crop issue. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I was against changing or implementing any whip rules initially, and I'll tell you why. Okay, my opinion is that, and I'm pretty sure that I'm correct, that in every racing jurisdiction in the United States, the stewards have the authority to call in any rider for excessive misuse or abuse involving the whip and fine and or suspend them. And they hardly ever do it. So them not doing their job forced certain jurisdictions to adopt a new rule. Now, I'm all for the new crops that Ramon Dominguez introduced,
Hmm.
the added ones. The one I saw two. I saw one that looked like it had like a Nerf on the end that you
Yes.
couldn't hurt anybody with if you tried,
Right.
and another one with like a spongy thing on the end that again you couldn't hurt anyone if you tried and used it properly.
Right.
So I was all for that. But as far as the rule restricting how many times a rider taps or hurts, I see the rider's argument where, hey, listen, sometimes it's a safety issue. If a horse is getting out and I've got to tap him, and I can't do it because I'm worried about a fine or a suspension, and I go out into another horse, it can cause a serious, even a fatal accident for horse or rider. So I get that, and I think that the riders at least should have been involved in any type of rule changing or implementation. But what I don't understand is if the stewards are doing their jobs, this rule's always been in place.
But
I mean,
again, you have different rules at different racetracks in different states. And again, this is something I hope that the authority for HISA will look at. I mean, those of us who ride horses know that the whip can be a very useful tool. Whenever I trail ride, I always take a whip with me because sometimes you have to move a horse quickly to avoid an incident, or they're going down into a creek and that it's too deep for them. So I understand that, and I understand using the whip in dressage, which I also do. It can be used as a corrective tool. But I think for a lot of people who don't ride, it's the visual of whip, 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 whip. And I think that's where the authority is going to have to try to come up with something. And I have met Ramon. I have seen the whip with it looks like a Nerf ball on the end. And I agree with you that it doesn't seem like I hit it on my hand several times. It doesn't feel like it should sting horses, but it can be used as correction. So I'm waiting to see and hopeful that HISA will make some regulations. So like you said, one jockey, who does it in one state is fine, and he does the same thing in another state and is penalized. We need uniform regulations on whip use as well.
And it's interesting you say that, because I'm a very I watch races very closely, okay? And it was very interesting to me how well the California jockeys rode on Kentucky Derby weekend and on Preakness weekend when they got out of California and away from the restrictions on the whip that are in California. And I was like, these guys are riding great because they're loose. They feel like they're free. They can use their crops as much as they want. And their horses were really finishing well and running well. And I could see the difference in just their body language and their action and their motion on the horses. So I knew without even asking any of them, and I'm friends with a lot of them, and I knew, I'm like, they're comfortable, they're happy. But I don't think that we should automatically appease people that don't understand the sport. I think that in addition to the regulations and the uniformity and making sure it's safe for the riders and they can use their crops as they have to, I think we should educate the public. Say, listen, what you're looking at may not be as bad as what you think. Here's the whip. This is what it looks like. We should have pictures of them. They should, when you walk into the racetrack, there should be a display where you can walk right up and touch it and see, hey, this doesn't hurt the horse. It's used for correction, encouragement, and stuff like that. And as fans walk in, they should be able to see and touch that Nerf type thing on the end. So we educate them and let them know that, hey, we don't want to beat our horses, and anybody that does, like I said, I think the steward should take action and call them in and fine them, and those kind of fines and penalties I think should be steep, and discourage any rider from doing anything like that, because it doesn't happen often, but I've seen atrocities with riders and the whip, and it's just something that we shouldn't tolerate. So I really didn't know what to expect in meeting you, Valerie. I'll tell you the truth, I didn't know what the Humane Society's take on horse racing was, and I don't probably to my detriment, but I usually kind of do my shows and just let them go wherever they go. It's not like I do a whole bunch of research and know all your positions and opinions and what I'm going to ask you beforehand. I figure, hey, I'll meet somebody. It's one-on-one, and we see what we think and where it goes. And it just plays out better for me that way. And I just how I do it, So I really didn't know what to expect. And I was concerned that it could be a little adversarial because I didn't know whether you had the same philosophy as PETA, and it was like, listen, we want to shut horse racing down. We want everybody who's ever had a positive banned. We want this, we want that. And I think we're a lot more on the same page than I thought we would be going in, because I don't think there's anything that you said that I really disagree with. And I think that your involvement and your organization's involvement is an asset to the sport and something that the sport should embrace. And I hope that people that watch this realize that and appreciate your support and welcome it, as opposed to the PETA position where everybody's claws are up and they've kind of become the enemy of the game, because I don't feel that, based on our conversation, that the Humane Society is the enemy of horse racing at all. I think you're an asset to it.
No, we were, like I said, we were the lead animal welfare organization that for the last several years has worked on the Hill in Congress, trying to educate lawmakers and their staff, help them understand, I think for a lot of lawmakers, it was impressive for them to see like the head of the Jockey Club walk in and have the Humane Society of the United States standing right beside them, asking for the same thing, you know? And I think that getting to know a lot of these people from the industry, um, it's been educational for me. And some of them have become my friends, and they're again, they want the best for the sport and the horses. That's what America wants. That's what the future audiences want. And I think with the expansion of sports betting, that it's important, horse racing is going to need to step up and convince people that they're treating these animals fairly in order to continue to expand its audience.
I would take it a step further and say it's essential for them to even survive, let alone
Right,
expand the audience. I think they need to do that to survive,
right.
in the wake of sports gambling and everything else, and just the current environment. Last question, and then I'll leave you with anything that you might want to add. But last question: what do you think are going to be the biggest hurdles going forward?
For HISA,
Just for racing in general, for HISA and racing, what are our, I mean, we want to get, you and I want to get to the same place.
right.
We've got HISA in place, we're making progress. What's going to be our biggest hurdle?
Oh, I think I think people are going to need to believe that the regulations for doping and racetrack safety that HISA creates um, are fair and humane, and that they are enforced. We've worked on a lot of regulations for different animal situations, and you always feel good when a bill passes, but a lot of times there's a lack of enforcement. So I would hope that that other piece falls into place, that the enforcement is fair, and that they're, I figure if you like the status quo, then you're going to either have to change or change jobs.
Right.
It's come
I,
down to that.
I agree. Anything else that you'd like to add, or that you'd like to make sure people are aware of about yourself, about the Humane Society, about and anything that's going on?
I can One thing I can tell you is we are a bill called Save America's Forgotten Equines. It's an anti-horse slaughter bill. Just introduced in the last few weeks, and we have been overwhelmed by the support that we have received from some members of the racing industry who want to work together with us on the Hill and in convincing lawmakers that horse slaughter should be ended. We don't eat excess cats and dogs. There's no reason that horses should be sent to Canada and Mexico to be slaughtered. So I'm all I can say is I'm very happy that they're going to be joining us in this fight, because again, a lawmaker hears from a lot of people, but I think having some major industry people stand up for horses and saying, this bill has to pass. It's important. I think that kind of shows how well we have worked together in the interest of the welfare of horses.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that there are a lot more people in the industry that feel the way that you do, and that
Mhm.
appreciate, what you're saying, than that the industry gets credit for. Unfortunately, I'm also of the opinion that you're only as strong as your weakest link, and there are some people who don't feel the way that we do, and treat horses as, commodities,
Right,
or property, and worse.
right,
And that's unfortunate. But like I said, that's, not exclusive to our game. It's in every business, sadly enough.
correct.
Um, but there are a lot of people who feel the way that we do, and I think that's encouraging. And hopefully, we are the ones that, win out, and make some positive change. So thank you so much for
You're
coming on.
welcome.
I really appreciate it. It was very enlightening to me, very refreshing. and very, most importantly, encouraging. So it was an absolute pleasure meeting you, and I thank you for coming on Past the Wire.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Vino Rosso has taken the lead, and it's a vintage performance by Vino Rosso.
Nobody does it better.